Yeah, I don't think Mother knew about this.
Uncle Marvin was strangled by his own beard.
Yep, you never saw it coming.
And hello, America, and welcome to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher at this end, your radio root sleuth on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Who do we have today? We got a couple of great guests. Craig Foster's going to be here from Family Search International, talking about the little-known United Kingdom courting and marriage traditions. And I will tell you, if you're not aware of these things, you're going to want to hear what he's talking about coming up in just a little bit. Later on in the show, from our sponsors over at Ancestry.com, Krista Cowan is back, bringing us up to speed on what's happening with the indexing of the 1950 census that was just released a few days ago. This is going to be so much fun, and I'm interested in hearing what some of her discoveries are in this year's census. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, come on in. Yeah, you can sign up on our website, ExtremeGenes.com, or on our Facebook page. We would love to have you there for links to past and present shows, a blog from me each week, and links to stories you'll appreciate as a family historian / genealogist. And speaking of which, let's head out to Boston and talk to one who's kind of engaged in that kind of work. It's David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
Hey, I'm sorry, I just got finished doing all of my third cousins in the 1950 census. Have you found an age discrepancy yet? I'm finding them. People are still not right about their ages.
They're still lying about their ages. As we all know, it's just gone on historically. You can go back to the 1850 census when they first started listing them, and there's plenty of them right there. It's always funny to me. We see a 10-year leap, and then somebody in the household ages all of 7 years. And then again, 8 years, the next 10 years. And pretty soon, they are completely offline with their birth times, you know?
Soon they won't be even born.
Right.
I mean, Well, I found my mom and I found my maternal and paternal grandparents. My dad is still hiding out someplace in Boston. I haven't found him yet. He hadn't married my mother yet. And I found some cousins. I found some great aunts and uncles. How about you? Who have you found?
Found my mom with her first husband in Ohio. She was there for all of maybe 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Right during the census. I found my grandparents in Oregon. Found my half-sister and my half-brother in New Jersey with their mom, who was separated from my dad at the time. So I haven't found my dad yet. So I'm going to have to wait till all the indexing is caught up. But I'm sure he will show up somewhere and I'll know where he was.
Well, you know, for Family History News, I have a real doozy of a story to start with. This comes from Ohio, where someone was going through family photographs for her husband's side. In this box of photos, there's one of Minnie Burnt, who vanished in January 1906 after leaving her home. And she thought she was eloping, but she didn't end up with a marriage certificate. She ended up with a death certificate. She was murdered by her supposed love of her life, and he shot her in a barn because he wasn't given permission to marry her. So if he couldn't have her, apparently no one else was going to either.
Yeah.
And I thought the old saying was, if you love someone, let them go, and if they truly love you, they'll come back, right? Well, in this case, there's no coming back.
What a bit of research is going to come from that one.
Well, you know, I love research when they're starting to mix in archaeology and genealogy, and I have people that will call up occasionally and they'll ask, when are we going to be able to get permission to dig up great-great-grandpa to get his DNA? Well, if you want to dig up your 50th great-grandfather, that's not bad. You just need an archaeologist. And that's what's happened in Leipzig, Germany, where they found the graves of warriors known as Avars. Avars traveled to Europe approximately 1,500 years ago. And what they've done is they've looked at the DNA remains on 27 sites throughout Hungary and found out they have a strong connection with graves of people found in Mongolia.
Wow.
DNA showed this migration pattern. And, it's not the first time this has happened where they find the DNA matches up and helps with the migration. Because, there is no Ellis Island to go through. There's no naturalization immigration situation. So it's going to be DNA. So this is an aid to future generations. The next story, in India, they have found these limestone jars out in the middle of the forest. They're ginormous jars, 10 feet high and 6.5 feet wide.
What? Wow.
These are the biggest urns you've ever thought you'd find. Yeah, they're for cremated human remains. And they were probably created during a funerary practice thousands of years ago. And they happen to be there. And they've been found in the jungle.
Wow. So nobody's seen them all these years, and now they've just stumbled on them. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's what happens with jungles. You get a little overgrowth, so the next time you have a cremated remain in your backyard, remember to cut the grass every so often.
Good point. It's funny, though. You think about all the stuff that's out in a jungle somewhere in Africa, maybe in South America, that's still waiting to be found. And every once in a while, you come upon something that just makes you go, wow.
Well, think of all the Mayan temples and Aztec temples they've found in the past 100 years that have just been overgrown. They've turned into natural mountains, and all of a sudden, wait a second, they have stairs.
Right, yeah. Where'd this stuff come from? It's just amazing to think what might still be out there.
Well, I know what's out there is my dad in the 1950 census, and after I'm done talking with you today, I'm going to go look for him some more. So if anybody has found George R. Lambert, born 1925 in Massachusetts, please return him to his son. He's looking for him, genealogically speaking.
Of course.
Well, that's all I have from Beantown. And remember, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, we'd love to have you as a member. Use the coupon code EXTREME and save $20 on the membership on AmericanAncestors.org.
All right, David, we will talk to you at the back end of the show for Ask Us Anything. And on the way next, from Family Search International, Craig Foster talking about little-known United Kingdom courting and marriage traditions. Some of the things he has to say are just absolutely bizarre. If you haven't studied some of this stuff, you're going to enjoy the segment coming up next. Get ready. It's on the way in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Genies, if you haven't done so yet, you've got to check out Ancestry.com's new storytelling creation center, Ancestry Stories. Their story builder allows you to create a story with 6 different slide types, including a title page, a photo display page, including stock pictures they provide, and documents. And you can write a summary. And with those photos, you can add motion, panning left to right or right to left. For now, these stories can only be created on your iPhone, but Android is still to come and can be saved to your ancestors' pages on your trees. You can then access via phone, and in time, it'll appear on your desktop. You can also share it with family members and friends, whether or not they subscribe to Ancestry.com. For the younger generation that wants stories in a quick and easy-to-consume form, you can't beat this. I've already shared a story with my family, and the reactions are remarkable. Try out these incredible new tools and share your new story creations on social media using hashtag #MyAncestryStory. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. Welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. And this is very interesting. I went to a recent conference on family history at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And there are all kinds of great classes that are shared there. And one of them was taught by this man who's on the phone with me right now, Craig Foster. He works over at FamilySearch.org, in fact, one of our sponsors. And Craig, nice to have you on the show. And you did a fabulous presentation on weddings, and particularly from the British Isles, and some of the customs that were over there that might help us understand our ancestors a little better. And some of those customs that were actually brought over to the United States, I would imagine New England and probably Virginia and the South, yes?
Yes, thanks for having me on. Yes, there were various customs, both courting and marriage customs, that were in the British Isles, and then obviously, since so many British people immigrated to New England, Virginia, all along the eastern seaboard, they brought these customs with them, which would be expected. And sometimes the customs, while they eventually died out in England and Scotland and that, they continued at least for a while longer over here in America. Interesting. And these don't necessarily show up in records, right? For the most part, no. Although you will find references sometimes in old diaries, or even some local histories that they'll talk about it to a degree, but not a great degree. So it's a hint here and a hint there, and it's a matter of piecing it all together. Sure. Now, one of those things that we're going to talk about as far as courting goes was the consideration of what betrothal meant. Now, I think most of us today think of betrothal as being like engaged, right? Right. But it was not that way in the 18th century. No, absolutely not. It was considered much more binding. In fact, that's why when a couple were betrothed, they were supposed to do it in a public setting in front of a priest or a minister of some type, and in front of male representatives from both sides of the family. And the reason why is because they allowed a degree of intimacy that was not allowed, or we would not expect to be allowed nowadays. And that is, they allowed right up to full sexual intercourse. In fact, that's why we always tell people, if you're looking for a marriage because a child was born a certain date and you know that was the first child, then you better look right up to a week or so before the child was born for the marriage to take place, because of this allowing this degree of intimacy. I actually found a record like that just a week or so ago on a relative, not a direct, but somebody who'd been married 10 days before, and then the baby was born. Right. But I don't know if it had to do with this or not. As long as the couple was married, that child was considered legitimate. Ah, well, tell us some more of these things. This is kind of interesting stuff. What is this thing bundling? Tell me about that. Okay, so bundling was done mostly in pre-industrial revolution times, and it took place mostly in the north of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, not so much in England, particularly down in the middle and the south part of England. And this was done mostly with the agrarian or working class, where they would work all day. They didn't have time to really do much courting except at night. And so they would come and the parents and family would bundle them into the bed. Usually it was the guy going to the girl's place, and they would bundle them together into bed. They would put the covers over them, and then they would put a rolled up blanket between them or a board or something like that. Sometimes they'd even put the girl into a very large stocking type thing and tie it.
Really?
With the idea that they could talk with each other. They would talk until they just fell asleep, but there wouldn't be any intimacy because this was still in the courting.
Yeah, this is dating. This is dating, and we're talking 18th century here, yes?
This was 18th century dating among the more, the agrarian class. And this was brought over to New England and was done in New England until actually long past when it was given up in Scotland and other parts of the British Isles. And ironically, some British publications even kind of looked down on the New Englanders, commenting that they still practiced something like that, yet that's where they got it from, was from their original homeland.
So what made them actually end bundling in the British Isles?
Well, it grew out of style for a couple of reasons. One, particularly with the Industrial Revolution, came better methods of heating, and so they didn't have to bundle up into bed. They were able to heat the house, less expensively and for longer. And plus, there was a change in courting and all of that, particularly after what some historians like Lawrence Foster and Peter Laslett referred to as the first sexual revolution. Everyone talks about the 60s being the sexual revolution, but they argue that the first sexual revolution actually took place in the 1770s, 80s. It had started a little bit earlier in some places, but particularly 1770s and 80s, and they looked on it all as in a different way, and they decided that bundling was just a little too risque and it encouraged illegitimacy a little too much. And so that went, and it was in reaction to this first sexual revolution.
I'm talking to Craig Foster. He's with FamilySearch.org, and we're talking about some of the unusual customs in courting and marriage in the British Isles. Now let's jump over to the marriage side of things here, Craig. And you were mentioning to me off air before we went on that there are a lot of records that just don't show up. And this is really important for people to understand if they're searching for ancestors in that part of the world.
That's right, absolutely. And there are several reasons why the records wouldn't show up. Usually when we're doing research, we go to the parish where the bride was from, or perhaps where the groom was from. And if we don't find the marriage in the record right away, we decide, okay, they either were nonconformists or they got married in a parish right nearby. So we do the usual radius search, and of course we try to get access to nonconformist records. But you have to keep in mind that with marriage, they had to get married in the Church of England, and up until 1837.
Right.
So we sit there and we go, well, okay, I really don't understand it, unless they were Quakers or something like that.
Yeah.
But what happened was there were some places where the marriages were performed. And so let me tell you really quickly. For example, fleet marriages. There was a part of London that was within the sound or within the environs of the Fleet Prison. And these irregular and clandestine marriages took place in this area of London. And there were a couple of areas right all around the same area altogether where people would go, they would get married, and then the marriages weren't recorded, or they were put into another book. There would be a couple of books that would be available, or they would change the names. And so these were quick and irregular marriages that were technically not, they were barely legal, if that, and they were certainly not canonical. In other words, the church really looked down on this.
Sure.
There were also places out in the country, some of these parishes where they were known as lawless churches. And they would be kind of the poor churches out there where the minister was happy to do anything in order to get a little bit of money because they were, barely making it, economically. And so they would go to these churches, and sometimes they were, a number of parishes away or even over into another county. And then, of course, after the laws were changed in the early 1750s, then of course you had the Marriage Act of 1753 changed it. People would go up to Gretna Green, which was across the Scottish border, because the Scottish laws were a little more lenient, and so couples wanting to get married and didn't have permission from their parents would rush up to Gretna Green for a quick marriage.
Wow. Well, it sounds like another place we have to start looking. That isn't the best news that I've heard here, Craig, because I think most of us hope that at some point something's going to show up on a website somewhere, and you're saying maybe not. In many cases.
I'm saying maybe not, because there were thousands of marriages that took place each year in the area of the Fleet Prison, and a good portion of those marriages were never recorded. That's just one example. So sometimes you just may not be able to find your ancestor's marriage because of a reason like that.
I don't like hearing things like that. But, Craig, I enjoyed it very much, especially the thing about bundling. That's absolutely insane.
Yes, it really was kind of crazy.
I've learned something today. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it, and hope to talk to you again.
Look forward to it.
And coming up next, Krista Cowan from our sponsors over at Ancestry.com. What could we possibly talk about? Well, how about the 1950 census? Yeah, it is out and the indexing process is underway. Certain states are already complete. You're going to want to hear all about it. It's coming up when we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. And welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, talking once again to my good friend Krista Cowan from over at Ancestry.com. And of course, Krista, there is really nothing to talk about other than the 1950 census release. And there's going to be new news like every week for weeks to come on this.
Yeah, it's a process. Sometimes people think that the release of a census is a sprint, but really it's a little bit more of a marathon.
Well, it has been more of a marathon in the past, but it's a lot faster this time around. Let's talk about the fact that, first of all, you have already indexed 3 of the states after the release of 6.9 million images?
Yeah, 6.9 million images released by the federal government. Ancestry got them downloaded and then uploaded to our site within 48 hours. And simultaneously, we started running our handwriting recognition indexing tool on those images. We've already got Delaware, Wyoming, and Vermont complete.
Wow. So those are done, and you got more in the loop right now. Which ones are close?
Yeah, so the way that this is working is Ancestry is running this handwriting recognition technology tool against those images. We're then delivering that computer-generated index to Family Search, where the Family Search volunteers are reviewing those records. So currently sitting at Family Search is Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona, with more streaming online every day.
Most of the West. This is awesome. And let's talk about this artificial intelligence, because this is the first year that this has ever happened. And I know you've been going over some of the names yourself. How many of them so far?
So far, I've reviewed about 4,000 names.
4,000 names. So the question I'm sure everybody's asking right now is, how good is this artificial intelligence at reading the handwriting of how many thousands of enumerators from the 1950 census? What have you found?
You know, we have brilliant data scientists here at Ancestry who have developed this proprietary algorithm to read these records. I shouldn't be shocked, but of the 4,000 records I've reviewed, I have made very, very few corrections. It's an almost pristine index. Like, it's fascinating to me that the technology can read the handwriting of dozens of different enumerators with different styles and different pressure on the paper and all sorts of crossouts and rewrites.
Colors.
Yeah, colors. Yeah, it's amazing.
You know, it is. It's a remarkable thing. And hopefully all those people who created this are patting themselves on the back today, because we've never seen a rollout like this. I mean, in the past, yes, you've wanted to get the entire state out so that people don't go online and look for their relative in the index and then they're not there. And then they don't go back thinking, oh, well, it's never going to be there. That's why we roll them out one state at a time, so you get the full, complete deal right from the start. So really, very soon here, we're going to have 9 of the states up.
Yeah, and more every week. So our plan is to release whatever completed states are every week. And so every Wednesday morning, I'll be going live at 11 o'clock Mountain Time on the Ancestry YouTube channel to announce which states were completed and published that morning. So we'll give you weekly updates as we go.
Now, is there any delay in larger states, or is it just the smaller states are easiest to get out quick, or are they working on them all at the same time? How does this work?
Yeah, so we are working on things simultaneously, but the smaller states do just run through faster. So Wyoming, Delaware, and Vermont, that's the reason for those. I've just checked on Family Search, and it looks like Utah's about 98% done. I think that has more to do with the people who are volunteering their time and where their interests are than anything else.
Sure.
So really, it's just up to the volunteers and what states they select for the review process at Family Search.
Wow. You know, I've been wearing these quite a bit lately. These are the glasses that help protect your eyes because you're spending too much time on screens. They're absolutely amazing at keeping you going for long, long hours. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I found stuff right off the bat using your Ancestry district finders right in the front so that you can actually go in, put in an address, and find the people you're looking for. You don't need the index. So if you're waiting for some of those larger states, I have a lot of people from New York and New Jersey. You might have some folks from California. You're going to put the address in there if you know it from where they were in 1950, and it'll take you right to the very grouping of like 17 to 25 pages somewhere in there. And you can pretty much go through those very quickly and find the people you're looking for. And I was able to find my dad's first wife and my half-sister, my half-brother, and learned that in 1950, they were separated at that time, which I was aware that they had separated a couple of times before they were finally divorced, but I didn't realize it was happening then. So I found them, but I haven't found Dad yet. I don't know where he is, so I'm going to have to wait for the index to pop up for one of those states. How about you? Have you found any interesting discoveries, Krista?
Yeah, absolutely. So my family is mostly in California. So my dad with his parents, my mom's parents, and her older sister. But the interesting discovery that we made was my dad's grandmother, as she was widowed and she had an adult daughter who had just returned from World War II. She had a teenage daughter who was still living at home. And we thought that that was kind of their living situation. But when I found her on that 1950 census image, she had 2 boarders living with her, which, if you know anything about my great-grandmother, you know is kind of shocking. She was a rather grumpy, antisocial woman. The thing we always tell in the family is whenever she'd answer the phone, she'd always just say, "What?" Like, no hello, no. None of that. But
how pleasant.
Yes, lovely woman. But there were these 2 boarders, and so I had started looking into who they were, and it was a younger widowed woman with a small daughter. And they were from Minnesota, and they had a very German name. And so what I suspect is that my very German Lutheran great-grandmother may have been encouraged by her pastor at her local church to take this woman and her child in, and that wouldn't surprise me. But the fact that they existed surprised me, and that nobody in the family knew that she had ever had boarders was kind of a fun discovery.
It is fun to go through these. This is the first census that's really close to the time that I was born. And I grew up on the same little lane my entire youth and into my early adulthood. And so I actually went through to see if I could find, who was living on the street at that time. And we had no sidewalks. There were no street lights. We lived out in the backwoods of Connecticut in Fairfield County. And it looks like that little lane was actually skipped. But there was another little street similar to it that was right nearby, and I was going up the road and going, oh, well, there's so-and-so's parents, there's so-and-so's grandparents. Oh, I remember them. Names I hadn't seen in years and years and years, or even thought of or heard of. And it was funny because here you are looking at these handwritten names on this street, the streets listed down the side on this 1950 census entry. And it just took me right back to the road where they lived, what their house looked like, the little brook that went underneath the road and into this pond that I actually fell into once when I was trying to dip my hair into the water with one of my friends, and had to get rescued by the neighbor lady who hauled me back up to the house and called my mom. And so, it's funny the things that come back to your mind when you go through lists like that. Well, good stuff happening right now, Krista, and everybody's talking about it. This is obviously going to be the highlight of the year, no matter what. Because no matter what comes out, nothing's going to be bigger than this. 150 million? About
154 million.
154, which is the biggest census ever released. And of course, they'll just get bigger and bigger as time rolls on. But there's a lot of discoveries to be made there. It's easy to access if you're looking by address or you're looking by name as the index comes on board. But it's happening very quickly here, and it's going to be really exciting to see how fast Ancestry, together with the volunteers from Family Search, can put the entire index together and to see how accurate it really is. It's really quite amazing. So congrats to everybody over there.
Thank you so much. We're excited and we're fully invested in this marathon.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Krista. David Allen Lambert is next, joining me for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Hey Genies, Ancestry now has an exclusive partnership with PhotoMine, the leader in photo scanning and archiving. What does this mean to you? Well, imagine inheriting an old photo album and you want to digitize all the images. Up until now, you'd have to remove the pictures, place them in a scanner, crop them, and perhaps use Photoshop to improve them. Now, by using these amazing PhotoMine tools from Ancestry, you can use your phone to take a picture of an entire page from your album. The tools will automatically separate and crop each picture, improve focus, and restore color or colorize your images. Then you can assign which picture goes to which person on your tree. If you've been waiting years to get around to the tedious project of scanning your old albums, it's been worth the wait. No more pulling your photo albums apart and trying to reinsert the pictures back in proper order. No more tearing of your old photos while removing them from those so-called magnetic albums of the 1970s. Sign in to Ancestry through their mobile app to try it out.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Hey Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow Genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. All right, it's time to open the letter bag. Of course, we don't have any letter bags anymore, David, now do we? It is Extreme Genes, America's family history show on extremegenes.com. I am Fisher, that's David Allen Lambert, and with Ask Us Anything, we take your questions. And this question, Dave, comes from Les in Queens, New York, and he says, hey guys, thanks in advance for taking my question. I found my birth mother in the 1950 census in the same apartment building as the guy I have been told was my birth father. I went to FamilyTreeNow.com and found out he is apparently still living. I have contact information and would appreciate your advice on how best to approach him. Les.
Well, I mean, it's always good to approach people with a lot of evidence first. I mean, DNA, that first comes to mind, because you might have that theory that could be dad, but you don't have the DNA proof. That could open up a very odd conversation for the first time you talk to them. And I don't even think picking up the phone or visiting is the best ideal. I mean, I would say writing. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think so. You remember when people used to take actual envelopes and would write an address on it and put a stamp on it. You remember stamps, right?
Back in the old days.
In the old days. And so to actually do that and include maybe some photos of yourself that perhaps are going to resemble this guy when he was younger might also help him along. But you're absolutely right, David. I mean, you've got to deal with the DNA evidence first to make sure that it's just not hearsay and speculation. I don't know about you, but I've worked with many people over the years who weren't sure of the identity of their birth fathers, and they had varying theories about who it was. One aunt would say one thing, somebody else would say something else, and you really can't reach out to somebody with just that kind of hearsay.
Right. I mean, and you also don't want to make the person go back into the back of their mind and even try to recall. Have all the facts, the figures, the names, the dates, picture of your mother, in fact. Say, do you remember her?
Yeah. Good call.
I mean, that would definitely be a good thing to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the other thing is, not only do you want to prepare a little case so that they understand that not only are you not looking for money or something like that, just wanting to connect with the birth father, prepare yourself for the possibility that they may not be willing to talk to you. This does happen periodically. I would say, though, for the majority of cases that I've been involved with personally, most of them come out very positive, but you do need to be prepared for the possibility that it's not going to wind up that way.
That's very true. Unfortunately, the psychological repercussions of any involvement of a new person in your family tree finding out about you or vice versa can sometimes be a hard thing to deal with.
You've probably had the same experience, Dave, where you reach out, you find a distant cousin, you want to talk to them about what they know, what photos they have. I mean, we're not talking about even a birth parent here, but I've had many people are going, who is this guy? What does he want? What's he getting at? Why does he want this information? You know, even for something from a distant cousin, sometimes they can question your veracity here when you're trying to reach out to them. So, you know, in the case of somebody that close, you want to make sure that you're really well prepared emotionally and as far as the case goes.
Oh, I agree 100%.
You know, another thought, David, is that perhaps you should be contacting somebody else within the family. Maybe there's a half-sibling out there. You could approach them with the evidence because maybe someone younger is also likely to be more understanding of exactly how you came to this conclusion. And I think that could help the case as well.
Completely agree.
All right. So great question, Les, and congratulations, first of all. This is a real early find on the 1950 census and a good one. And we wish you the best of luck in making this connection and hopefully developing some sort of relationship or communication at the very least. So good luck with that. Hey, we got another question coming up next when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, here we go again. Another question for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show at extremegenes.com. It is Fisher here with David Allen Lambert from the New England Historic Genealogical Society. And David, question number 2 this week comes from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Alexa writes, Dave and Fish, in a box from my grandmother's attic, my sister and I found a letter that mentioned her uncle being a greenie on a whaling ship out of New Bedford, Massachusetts. Anyone know what a greenie was and how to research this whaling man? That's a good question. I remember greenies were like amphetamines that baseball players used in the 60s. What is this, Dave? Do you know?
It's an old slang term that I haven't heard in a while. It's like a green hand or someone who's green help. A greenie is on their first voyage on a whaling vessel or on any nautical trip that they may have taken. So it could also be the color of their face on their first mission as well.
Makes sense.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's a good letter and plenty of information because you'll probably be able to date it and maybe know who this uncle is by looking at your genealogical notes. If it's out in New Bedford, you're really in luck because since the WPA worked on an index of all the whaling crew lists a long time ago, you can search for free via the New Bedford Whaling Museum's website at whalingmuseum.org. And you can search for crewmen. You can search on the destination and then sort it by vessel. You're going to get some pretty good information, even on the early ones that go back to the 1830s, right on down through the 20th century.
Wow.
You'll get the name of the person, their vessel, the type of vessel it is. You know, may it be a ship or a brig or a bark. You get the age of the person. You'll get their skin color, their hair color, their eye color, and where they're from. So you should be able to get enough information shy of not having a DNA test to match up with one of these people to know if perhaps this is one of the people in your family tree. And for me, I used this database when it was simply a card index over 40 years ago when I was a kid, because what started me in genealogy was a whaler out of New Bedford who was a greenie in 1871.
Really?
And that greenie was my great-grandfather, my Nana's father, who I had the tintype picture of in the story that he was on a whaling ship. So this story came into port for me, I guess.
That tintype you mentioned, wasn't that a gift to you that really got you triggered in this years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, my uncle had returned a book of genealogy that was written in 1881, published. And when he handed the book to me, I was about 7 years old, and he's taking his coat off, and I noticed sticking out of the book was this sharp metal piece. Looked like it was, just a piece of tin. And I opened the book up because it looked like it was a bookmark of sorts. And sure enough, there was a picture of my grandmother's father. Now, I had no idea at 7 that an 80-year-old woman could have been young enough to actually have parents. So I asked my grandmother who it was, and she said, well, this is my dad. Well, I had only lost a goldfish at that point in time. So I decided to say to her, Nana, where do I go from here to meet him? Where does he live? Well, he died in 1921, so that was off the possibility scope. And I just started me in genealogy. So needless to say, A whaling story in genealogy got me hooked in genealogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very nice. And very good question, Alexa. And what good luck, too, that Dave knows so much about this stuff from his early roots. So thank you for the question. And, of course, for anybody who has a question for Ask Us Anything, you can email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com, and maybe we'll answer it on the air. David, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Until later.
All right, my friend. And thanks so much for joining us. If you missed any of the show or you want to catch it again, of course, you can listen online to our podcast version, which you can find on extremegenes.com, Spotify, Apple Media, TuneIn Radio. It's all over the place. We'd love to have you there. Take care. We'll talk to you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.